All right, guys, we're in the shop here today, and we're going to cover a topic that is a little bit daunting for some, but actually it's quite simple. And what that topic is how to measure to make sure you're getting the right shock for your vehicle. Now, QA1 offers a wide variety of different shocks, from non-adjustable shocks to single adjustable to double adjustable, even four-way adjustable shocks. And it could be used in a variety of different applications, whether it be a street rod, a hot rod, muscle car, race car, you name it. But as all of us hot rodders do, we change things. And when we customize our cars, how do we make sure the right shock is getting put on there? So let's start by the basics and just talk a little bit about what travel is, or what shocks require for stroke. Shocks have two directions of travel. They have rebound as the shock extends, and they have compression when the shock compresses. Jounce and rebound, many call it as well. What you want to do is, for obvious reasons, you don't want to have your shock completely bottomed out when sitting at ride height, nor do you want it to be fully topped out. And the reasons for that is you will take the internal components of the shock when you hit a bump, you see extension, things like that, and you'll actually take the internal components and bottom or top them out. It could cause damage to the shock, could cause damage to your vehicle. We don't want that. So how do we measure for shocks? What do we do? Well, what we want to do is ideally have the shock in the center of its travel when sitting at ride height. And when I say sitting at ride height, the way the car would sit as it goes down the road. With your standard wheel and tire combination you have on there, your suspension package as a whole. And the way we measure that is we measure from the center of the lower mounting point to the center of the upper mounting point of the shock itself. You can measure the fenders, you can measure your rockers, but what we're most interested in relation to the shock, is measuring the shock mounting points. So in this case here, what we're going to want to do is have the shock in the center of its travel, right? So that way you have good travel in either direction. And you might look at this and go, man, that shock only has 4 inches of travel, right? If you're looking at the chrome piston rod here. Well, you have to consider that when being used on an independent suspension, a lot of times you're actually looking at about a 2-to-1 motion ratio, the way your control arm actually operates. So that 4 inches of travel overall is now 8. So if you center the shock up, so you have 2 inches for compression and 2 inches on extension, that's actually about 4 to 4. I'm using round numbers here, of course. So these shocks, again, the QA1 shocks are available in a number of different varieties. So depending on what you're building, you could require a stud top end, you could require an eyelet bottom, or a T-bar, a number of different variations. So we can definitely accommodate you on that standpoint. And Summit Racing carries all of those different products. All right, so now that we have a better understanding of ride height and how to measure it and what we want to look for, we're going to see how this Mustang 2 shock incorporates in with this hot rod we have behind us, and also a drag car situation. So we can look at two different scenarios. So let's go take a look at this car and see what we're doing. All right, so we're checking out this 42 street rod here. Awesome build. And it has a front end that's very common you see in a lot of these early street rods and hot rods. So it's a Mustang 2 based design, but it's not a factory 74 to 78 Mustang 2 front clip. But what the Mustang 2 clip gives you, it gives you a rack and pinion setup, and it gives you a coilover option that a lot of guys run. And one thing you have to be very considerate of on a build like this is that the geometry of the Mustang 2 is very short, right? You're talking typically about 3 inches of shock travel. And you need to be very aware of that. And why it's very important is because we're graphing this Mustang 2 suspension into a vehicle it was never designed for. And the different manufacturers of these subframes and whatnot have taken a lot of that into consideration, but something you really want to do on the front end a lot of times is pick out your wheel and tire combination, or at least the diameter. And also, a lot of times it's really nice to hang a fender. You know, so that way, as you kind of position your ride height that we talked about earlier, you can see and reference where the wheel sits in the wheel well. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of mock this up at ride height, the way we're going to want it to sit, and use the rule of thumb of having the lower control arm parallel with the ground, and take our ride height measurement and figure out a shock that's going to work well in that situation. So let's, a lot of times what I'll do is get everything kind of mocked up like you see here. And again, we want to measure from the lower shock mount to the upper shock mount. And so grab your handy tape measure here. And you get it mounted right to the center, and we're looking at, let's see, about 9 3/4 inches. And again, everything is parallel with the ground, and that's a good rule of thumb. It's going to help eliminate a lot of your bump steer issues a lot of times and things like that. So let's grab our shock real quick. All right, so what we did here is we installed the QA1 shock. This is part number MS303. It's our Mustang tube base shock. It's 7 5/8 fully collapsed. It's 11 inches fully extended. So that 9 3/4 mark that we had earlier, that's kind of right in that sweet spot again. But one thing you notice here is I did not install it with the spring, right? And the reason why I do that is because it's very easy without the spring on there to take the suspension and actually articulate it, right? So you can move it through its full range of travel, making sure you don't have any clearance issues, you have good travel. And again, when it's sitting at ride height, that again, that piston rod is right in the center of its travel. So this is a prime example of, again, what you a lot of times run into when you're working on a hot rod. So let's go over, check out that Nova we talked about earlier, and check out a drag race situation. All right, so this is our DD501 shock, and this shock is 11 5/8 collapsed. It is 17 inches, it's fully extended. So let's take a quick measurement here and see what we're looking at for ride height. And again, you want to measure from the center of each mounting point. And when you do so on this, you're looking at about 11 3/4 inches. So you got plenty of compression travel, you got tons of extension travel at the same time. This car is really well set up. So if you have any questions as you're selecting the shock for your vehicle, make sure to call Summit Racing. They have a full tech team that does a great job selecting the right shocks for you. Visit their website, they got tons of information there as well. And if you have any other questions on QA1 products, whether it be ball joints, drive shafts, tubular components, you name it, visit summitracing.com.